Thank you so much for joining us. We're really glad to have you here. Um, my name's Emily Carlson. I'm your host for this evening. Welcome to the Bee Stewards Expert Lecture Series. Bee Stewards is an online self-paced course that's designed to teach you about bees, specifically their life histories and how to create bee habitat. So Bee Stewards is a program where you go through these 5 sections. So first, like, what is a bee steward? Why might you be interested in this? Understanding bee biology, how to assess habitat on your own property, build habitat generally, and then actually creating a habitat enhancement plan for your specific property. And as part of this process with the Bee Steward program, you'll go through and you'll inventory the plants you have on your property. And we will generate for you a customized report that shows you which species of bees you could attract by planting some new plants on your property. And so you can see here, the current bees are represented in black, and the future bees you could attract are represented in orange by adding specific plants. And so this report's saying that you could go from 148 bees to 162 species of bee. And this is run by the Oregon Bee Atlas, but the Oregon Bee Atlas was just the first. There's lots everywhere. So please definitely check out the Bee Stewards program. If you're interested, you can learn more at this link. As I said before, for our Zoom logistics, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. I'll monitor it while we listen to our talk from Jordan today. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. I'm really happy to welcome our speaker this evening, Jordan Brown, who's here representing the Rare Native Plant Program at the Oregon Department of Agriculture. Jordan's actually down in Corvallis at Oregon State as well. So I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Jordan.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Thanks for the introduction, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you all and share a little bit about my work and the work of the Oregon Department of Agriculture's Native Plant Conservation Program. Yeah, I might have been a little ambitious with the number of slides, so I might be speeding through this sort of quickly. But yeah, I do want to have some time to answer questions at the end. Um, yeah, and so we are the state entity responsible for threatened and endangered plant protection and conservation. Common misconception given the name is that we're just working with all sorts of native plants, which native plants are involved in our work, but really we focus on TNE plants. This view here, it brings us to some pretty interesting places across the state. This is a view from Mount Ashland that's home to an endemic Mount Ashland lupin. It's also a place where some of our staff and a lot of agency partners have been surveying for Franklin's bumblebee down there in Southern Oregon. So starting off way back at the beginning of this program, it was the legislation that established this program was modeled after the federal ESA. In 1987, the state legislature passed the Oregon Endangered Species Act, which created some Oregon revised statutes, which dictate, the specifics of what this program's responsible for, and then those get translated into Oregon administrative rules that are a more detailed description of how our processes work and what the details are of our responsibilities are and how we can fulfill those details. So we do this because of state law. Like that's why our program is here. We have specific obligations. Those responsibilities were given to the Oregon Department of Agriculture. But for myself and for the other folks that are in this program and a lot of the partners that we work with, we're doing this work because we feel like it's the right thing to do to help sustain life in Oregon and more broadly. Yeah, just, this is there's a long list of reasons why we try to protect biodiversity, but really, yeah, trying to protect and maintain the ecosystems and um, relationships that help, yeah, help us maintain a healthy natural environment and um, provide us with the diversity that we all appreciate and enjoy. This here's a good shot of a mix of some of our listed species. They're pretty small, so I don't know if you can see them, but we'll get some more good photos as we go. Um, so our mission broadly is to work with the citizens of Oregon or the people of Oregon to protect and conserve the state's rarest native plants. Really, yeah, it's focused on those that are most at risk of going extinct or that are really declining drastically. In practice, what that involves is a lot of research to get a better understanding of these plants. That was one thing that was kind of shocking to me. I joined the program in 2010 and was a little naive about our rarest threatened and endangered plants, and have come to know that there is often very little known about our threatened and endangered species, especially because some of the species, the plants that we have listed, are not federally listed. Um, Species that are federally listed under the ESA get a lot of can get a lot of resource dedicated to them and a lot of work done on them. And that it tends to not be the case for species that are just state listed, and we haven't always had the resources to put in the work with some of our state listed species. Um, and that's kind of a segue into the different iterations of this program over the years. So the research and regulation has ebbed and flowed over time with resources that we have available to us, as well as the staff that are in the program. So for many years, we did not have state funding to be able to really keep up with the regulatory needs for protecting threatened and endangered plants across Oregon. And so we were more heavily focused on research that was dependent on kind of external funding and partnerships. This is the current iteration of our program right here. It is four of us for the entire state. On the left there is Isaac Sandlin, and then moving to the right is Danielle Marshall, Paul Dunnett, and myself all the way on the far right. This was in 2022 when our current staff structure all got together. Everybody was hired, and the new iteration of the team started then. And we had a project shown here working on McFarland's 4 o'clock, which is endemic to Hell's Canyon, so the far east edge of the state. Um, Really rugged and rough, amazing, beautiful wildflower and beautiful scenery. So, um, good mix of excitement out there. I'm going to transition into some examples of the research that has been conducted in the program over the years. This image to the, I guess I'll just read this first. Yeah, so some of the variety of research that's been conducted is breeding system studies, research into population genetics, research in disturbance ecology, demographic and taxonomic investigations of poorly understood taxa and populations. And for the most part, those focus on species that are currently listed. Occasionally, when we're partnering with an external Excuse me. When we're partnering with other agencies, and they are able to provide funding for, say, a species that isn't listed, we do take that on occasionally. Because in addition to really focusing on our listed plants, we're trying to keep up and pay attention to other very rare plants in Oregon that may eventually need listing, if they continue to decline or be threatened. Generally, we refer to those as candidates, and we actually maintain a list of candidate species for listing, and it's good to have that so that land managers and others can be aware that, these are high priority plants that aren't listed now, so we should do what we can for them to avoid listing. Um, this plant on the left, Cicericium hitchcockii, was something that we ended up listing in 2023. So we recently um, had some more state resources come into the program, and we're able to put those to use with regulation, and that being able to meet our regulatory needs, as well as being able to invest time and effort into updating our state threatened and endangered plant list. Um, and with Cicericium hitchcockii, it occurs in the same um, range as several other Cicericiums, and our program did a bunch of taxonomic work on it in around 2010 or so. But recently, with our monitoring of populations, we realize that there are still some populations that don't fit cleanly into the species as it's described now. So this is an area that needs some research going forward. Cicericium hitchcockii is kind of a southern Willamette Valley species, but also extends down into Douglas County, around the Roseburg area. And somebody mentioned grass widows. Yeah, this is just a very extremely rare species of grass widow. Another interesting example of some research is, this is a view of a demographic study for Howell's Mariposa lily, which is a serpentine endemic from Southwest Oregon. There you can see a nice kind of serpentine woodland in the background. Um, yeah, this was a really interesting project where we were marking plants and monitoring them over several years. And that gave us a really interesting insight that what you're able to see above ground in any given year is not the entire picture of the population. There's a certain percent of this population that just does not send up a leaf, so we wouldn't be able to detect it. And there's also a certain number of individuals in the population that get browsed to the point where they're not detectable anymore. And so we were consistently underestimating the actual population sizes. Other types of research are working to develop conservation protocols and management guidance for plants, and provide that to land managers. On the left there, I wasn't involved with that one. Looks pretty exciting. That was a disturbance ecology study for Astragalus pecci, which kind of occurs um, in and or sorry, between Sisters and Bend, and then there's another large concentration further south, kind of south of Lapine and near Chiloquin. Um, but it occurs in some areas where, yeah, where there was major concern about land management and land use, and so this was an avenue to better understand what, if anything, we needed to do about those concerning land uses. Um, this other one is Howell's spectacular thelopody. There was a grazing study conducted with this species. It is highly palatable to cattle. It only grows in the Baker Valley now, as far as we know. But yeah, those are just some examples of the understanding we're trying to gain so that we can better manage for protecting these teeny plants. This is a image of a few plants we were working with in Southern Oregon recently all the way on the right, um, this slightly more burgundy is F. Fritillaria gentneri or Gentner's fritillary. That is an endangered plant, federally listed. It grows with these two other really closely related fritillarias. And as you can see, they're pretty easy to tell apart when they're flowering. But that inset on the lower right, that just shows a few leaves, the majority of the populations of these plants are not flowering. When they're immature, they just put up a leaf like that. And those leaves are not distinguishable to species. So we did some work partnering with Dr. Aaron Liston here at Oregon State University to do some we coupled some field sampling with lab work that focused on looking at chloroplast DNA as well as nuclear DNA to get a better understanding of all of these leaves that we don't know what they are, how many are Gentner's fritillary. So again, trying to just better understand these wild populations, this one being pretty cryptic. More types of research we do include working on developing methods for reintroducing and recovering populations. And yeah, sometimes that takes uh, kind of long-term life history studies in the field. But we also do a lot of work and have done a lot of work over the years in a greenhouse setting. On the left there, that's Fritillaria gentneri that was on the last slide. So while we're trying to understand those vegetative plant populations, non-flowering populate portions of the population better over, we're almost at about, I think we're about at a couple decades of actively um, introducing plants to the wild to increase the number of individuals in natural populations. And the success has varied a lot, but we've had some really great successes. That's a picture of the bulb in hand there and really a flat of really happy plants before we harvested them and to return them into the wild. On the right is an image of, um, yeah, not I've showed you some photos of us from really nice, beautiful places, but yeah, we get some rough conditions and weather as well. On the right, there, Pleripogon oregonus it was a project for Oregon semaphore grass, which is probably one of the rarest plants in the state, only known from a few locations. But yeah, we have done some introductions of that over the years and have had some really great success. There was a great partnership with the Burns Paiute tribe and establishing a healthy population on one of their properties, which was really informative and a positive advance for that species. Um, Here's just a little view at some greenhouse projects we do. Yeah, a lot of germination trials and working to identify optimal kind of germination protocols. We look at seed viability of the seeds we're collecting, try to develop cultivation protocols as well in the greenhouse. Um, so yeah, there's some exciting work that we get into here at the OSU campus. And yeah, in doing so, in kind of researching cultivation and plant production protocols, we often end up with some healthy plants. And so we'll do some introduction trials as well. Generally, we don't scale that up to like really large scale. I think our model has typically been to try to develop the methods and then like pass the torch to another partner. But there are a few plants like Gentner's fritillary that we've really kind of continued to work with over a really long period of time. Um, this one, the Plagiobothris hirtus there, rough popcorn flower from Douglas County, the Roseburg Sutherland area. That was a seed production trial where we grew those plants. It's a wetland plant, so those gutters, we kept those filled with water, but the plants could grow and then drop seed that we were able to collect off of that weed cloth down there. Um, and on the right is Howell's spectacular Thelopody, endemic to the Baker Valley. That was a really successful seed production program that we completed recently, producing millions of seeds that give us a chance to, yeah, try to establish more plants in the wild. Another big thing, a big area of focus is conservation status assessments and threat assessments. And that's something we've focused on a lot lately, because, like I mentioned, we haven't always been financially supported to be able to conduct this important work. And I think I should know this right off the top of my head, but there's about 20 federally listed plants, and I think we're closer to, I think between 70 and 80 state listed plants. And I mentioned, so the point I'm going to make or was trying to make is that it's difficult to get resources, external resources to support work on our state listed species. And now that we have the financial support and a little bit more flexibility, that is part of the main reason why we've got to turn back towards this conservation status threat assessments because um, there's lots of sites that have not been visited in decades. We really don't know where we stand for a lot of these state listed species, just because there aren't folks able to go out and collect the fundamental information about how the plants are performing in the wild. Um, and I think, yeah, there might be some cases where they end up that they're doing better than we would have expected. But unfortunately, just given the breadth and kind of abundance of threats and issues that a lot of these species face, um, yeah, we're really concerned that we are um, not accurately understanding the level of threat that they're facing and maybe the losses that have already occurred in between kind of times when folks have been able to dedicate effort towards them and monitor the populations. This is thin leaf pea, Lathyrus holochloris, is something that we recently added to the threatened and endangered list in 2023. It occurs up and down the Willamette Valley, a lot of sites, and so that was one we really put some serious work into to better understand how it's doing in the wild. Um, and yeah, in addition to, species plants that are closer to my home in the Willamette Valley, um, we travel across the state and really do try to fill gaps where there are gaps. And Eastern Oregon is expansive. There's a lot of really interesting kind of um, endemic species in Eastern Oregon, and also just a lot of rare plants and really in a really rugged landscape that can be difficult to access. And so they're, in a lot of ways, some of our Eastern Oregon rare plants are underserved. And so we've tried to make a point of working with them. And so in the past couple years, we've gotten to visit the Lepidium divicei there on the right, grows in these shallow playas in southeastern Oregon, and also into Idaho. But yeah, Davis's peppergrass. Um, and yeah, we collected some really valuable information with that plant, which co-occurs with this Phacelia inundata out there. Kind of that was exciting for me, a new species that I hadn't worked with yet. Um, this brings us back to the Willamette Valley. Bradshaw's lomatium was federally delisted within the past few years. Um, we sort of interpreted the status of the species differently than the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and have not made a determination to delist it through the state. So it still has state level protections. And we've been assisting with monitoring some populations since it has been federally delisted, which has been really great because, like I said, we weren't quite as convinced that it had a secure status. So us being involved with this monitoring, not only does it help kind of provide information to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about their determination, but it's going to kind of help inform how we move forward with this plant as well. Um, Another one of our major roles is providing guidance and support to non-federal land managers and other state agencies. Um, yeah, our while we do partner with federal agencies, our primary responsibility is for non-federal public entities in Oregon, and that has to do with the way our rules are written that govern our program, like our jurisdiction extends to all non-federal public lands, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. But it's great. I think it's great that we're here because a lot of agencies don't have a rare plant specialist on staff. And so we're able to step in. An example here, this is Cook's Lomatium in Southwest Oregon in the Rogue Valley on Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife land. It's the Denman Wildlife Refuge. And so we're able to provide them with support and guidance for how to best manage this rare plant resource. Yeah, we're able to work across different ownerships. So when there's like a broad push to promote a species, we have a lot of flexibility to yeah, just work across ownerships. Um, and yeah, we try to get our non-federal public land managers to just incorporate best practices into their management. And we're also, because we can kind of work across ownerships, we're in a unique position to be able to bring different parties together um, uh, to yeah, really kind of coalesce efforts and try to maximize the returns on our investments into these rare plants. So yeah, I kind of breezed through some of the types of research that we've done and that we do. And now I'm going to talk more about the regulatory side of our program, um, which is I'd say that's the emphasis of what the state law, state rules are written. They focus on kind of the regulatory side of this program, which is, yeah, really, really important because it helps us get ahead of potential impacts and avoid damaging populations and plants that are already struggling. But yeah, the main points in our rules and responsibilities for our program are maintaining the threatened and endangered plant list, as well as a separate list of candidate species that, are kind of on the brink of maybe needing regulatory protection at some point in the future. We have a permit system for folks that are working and I'll probably say this a lot, T&E as threatened and endangered, but we have a permit system for folks that are working with T&E plants so that we have that oversight to kind of make sure the proposed activities either don't have an impact or that it's a negligible and acceptable impact for um, uh, the efforts that they're hoping to conduct. We consult with, like I said, the non-federal public land managers to make sure that the activities they're doing on their lands and the way that they manage their lands are not inadvertently or intentionally impacting threatened and endangered plants. So yeah, just kind of making sure we do no harm is really the goal there. Um, and we're also a source for information about our TNE plants and candidate plants for other entities across the state. This photo on the left there is White Rock Larkspur from kind of the Portland metro area. Really beautiful, beautiful wildflower there. So our responsibilities, oh, sorry, this is responsibilities of other state agencies with regards to TNE plants. Our rules and revised statutes our Oregon revised statutes are in Chapter 564 and Administrative Rules and 603-073. If anyone wants to go back through and it's pretty dry, but it is pretty interesting how those rules are structured. They specify that non-federal public land managers need to make sure that the actions they authorize, fund, and the things that are carried out on their lands will not impact T&E plants, our listed plants. And um, just like I said before, it's through our consultation and permitting that we help ensure that no harm is done. The plant on the left here is Western Lily, really spectacular wildflower from the Southwest Oregon coast and extends down into California. Um, and I've touched on this a little bit, but state agency, I think, can be really misleading when it's said that way. But in our rules, it is clearly defined to include more than just what I think folks tend to think of as state agencies. It really includes all non-federal public lands or subsidiaries of the state. So that's county, county lands, other municipal lands, city lands, utility districts, yeah, community colleges, university campuses, school properties. Um, so yeah, there is um, it's a lot, and it's a lot for us to keep up with. One important point that I do want to remind folks of is that our jurisdiction for threatened and endangered plant protection does not extend on to private land or federal land. Um, Folks understandably get very concerned about their private property rights when it comes to TNE species. And so we just try to let everybody know that no private property rights would ever be put in jeopardy from having a threatened or endangered plant on your property. Um, yeah, there's been some sad cases in the past where folks, try to get rid of a TNE species because they're worried about their private property rights. Um, there on the right was some work that we did a couple years ago on Applegate's milk vetch, which is endemic to the Klamath Falls area, and it occurs on the Klamath Falls Airport, which was an interesting and logistically complicated place to be working. But other just kind of specifics from the or Oregon administrative rules that lay out the responsibility of land managers. It really defines what sorts of activities can be regulated, and they really tried to capture anything that could affect our T&E plants. And I just highlighted something specific in here because, and I think it's even more explicit later, but interfering with um, pollinators actually counts as well. Some of our plants really depend, and there's a degree here, but some of our listed species are more dependent on pollinators for seed production and reproduction than others. Um, and yeah, I just thought that was like pretty forward thinking back in the day to be able to include something that could be perceived as a little bit peripheral to um, as opposed to like a direct impact to a plant that maybe destroyed or damages the plant. But interfering with its life processes and its ability to reproduce is also covered. Um, yeah, so take is all, I think the first bullet point there is kind of all the things that I would first think of, but also disrupting pollinators or other organisms that the plant requires would count um, as a take or an impact. So the way we deal with um, yeah, consultations broadly is we need it's kind of a partnership with the state agency or the land manager that they put in some work to understand the extent of the rare plant population, um, and what the expected impacts may or may not be from the proposed actions. And we kind of take that information in-house and are able to review that and provide recommendations on how to move forward. Sometimes that involves us, um, yeah, sometimes we'll be proposing alternatives, and other times if the alternatives aren't suitable, then we do have to get to negotiating mitigation for unavoidable impacts. While it is our responsibility, it's our jobs to work to protect these TNE plants, and we take that pretty seriously. We are nowhere, we have no interest in um, trying to protect plants over uh, personal over the sa over a safety issue or something like that. There's been cases where, you know, highway improvement projects are needed for safety reasons, and those projects are going to impact a T&E plant. And there's no way I don't think we could, first off, we have no interest in getting in the way of, a safety related project. And so in those cases, it's like we work with our state agency to figure out what we can do to help make up for those impacts elsewhere. And that last point there, mitigation and monitoring is something that we require when impacts are unavoidable. This plant on the right here, Lawrence's milk vetch, kind of occurs along the counties, um, along the Columbia River, slightly east of Mount Hood. Um, and this is an interesting one that we've started to learn a little bit more about as we've been working with the Oregon Department of Energy on some wind farm and solar farm development projects in that region of the state. And there are some impacts to this species that got us involved. And yeah, interestingly, it's brought us to some sites that we'd never had access to before on private land. Um, we're starting to see that it's more abundant than we ever knew about before. So, yeah, there's still a lot of frontiers for these rare plants, a lot of unknowns. Another part of our regulatory approach is permits. And so these are Yeah, these are what we issue to um, folks that might be working on a TNE plant project on a smaller scale. Yeah, most often this is for like kind of conservation and recovery efforts. And again, this just gives us that opportunity to have some oversight to make sure that what someone's proposing isn't going to have any serious negative impacts to our um, to our TNE plants in the state. We recently, um, yeah, we have some good information on our website that helps guide land managers and other practitioners as to how to navigate the permit and consultation process and what the permit requirements are for different situations. Um, And yeah, I'm just gonna kind of skip over that, but it is on our website if anyone is curious. We recently got an online permit portal, which is great. This is one of many things where we're trying to kind of modernize and just get caught up. Like I said, we hadn't always had the resources to really focus on state teeny plants and on our regulatory responsibilities. So Um, yeah, we're doing a good job of slowly and steadily catching up on all of those things. Um, yeah, you can just Google ODA plant conservation and our program website will come up. Um, there's definitely, I think, yeah, there's quite a few different interesting things. It might be a little bit outdated, but some info on some of the recent projects we've worked on. But probably the thing that gets used the most is our full list of threatened and endangered plants. And we also have our candidate list on there. Um, and the species profiles, you can see an example here on the right of a recently listed species, something that I think we listed in either 2023 or 2024. But we have like a little cheat sheet or fact sheet that really tries to compile kind of the most essential information about our threatened and endangered plants. So if you're curious about any of them, that's a great place to go look. It has most of the information that would be needed if someone needed to do a survey. So like this is a resource that gets used heavily when we're having a consultation with a partner or a land manager, and they need to have a survey done to figure out if this plant occurs on their land, how much of it and whatnot. This has great guidance for the characters of the plant, the timing you need to be looking for it, the types of habitat and plants it's associated with. So all these tips for being able to find and correctly identify our threatened and endangered plants. And yeah, I also mentioned before, there's some good information about permitting consultation and guidance there, and also some good resources um, for surveyors. I'm just gonna go through this a little bit. Um, yeah, these are some new what I think of as new additions to our threatened and endangered plant list because I think before Danielle started working on the TNE plant list update in about 2022 or 2023. It had probably been about 2 decades since there had been any major effort to update our T&E plant list. Um, and there had been many recommendations, well, not many, but uh, a substantial number of recommendations from the botanical community and plant conservation community in Oregon of plants that folks were really concerned about, that they had documented declines. And so those were our top priority um, to focus on those in those first years of our TNE plant list update. Um, and uh, yeah, I think almost all of those first species we reviewed ended up qualifying for listing by the Oregon Department of Ag. Here we have Stansel's daisy. It's endangered. That's only known from two locations, just east of Gold Beach, in these kind of serpentine woodland areas. Seaside Gilia is a little annual from the sand dune and coastal strand habitats, the Oregon coast, and it was it's naturally associated with unstabilized sand dunes, which was what was natural here prior to the introduction of European beach grass. So European beach grass and some other weeds have really eliminated most of the suitable habitat for that plant. Ochicolomaceum is an Eastern Oregon species, really localized and only known from very few sites. Thin-leaved pea I mentioned is a Willamette Valley species. It's got kind of a broad range geographically, but is very rare. It's kind of it's found often in places where it's just hanging on in, the edge of at a fence row or on the edge of a roadside. So it's in a really precarious situation. Um, White fairy poppy, there you can tell how small this plant is. So I think in a way it's at a disadvantage there in terms of, being able to compete but this is another really interesting one with a very large range, if I'm remembering, I think from up into from British Columbia down to California, but widely spaced populations. It's very early blooming as well. So a couple of things. I'm just going to kind of touch briefly on what we look at and take into account when we are doing a listing status review. So it has to be uh, a valid described species that is native to Oregon. All of these are. Um, and it needs to be in danger of extinction throughout all or most of its geographic range. And that's something that folks have gotten hung up on in the past. Because sometimes we have a plant in Oregon that is kind of on the edge of its range, so it's really rare here, but it can be very abundant in like the core of its range. And these are the kinds of threat factors facing a species that need to be present in order for it to be considered for listing. So um, continued failure to reproduce, and due to limited population numbers, disease, predation, or other human-induced factors, and that it's either the range and habitat is being destroyed, or it's being overutilized, or regulatory measures are insufficient. So we draft up as comprehensive as of a kind of report as we can on the species and what's known about it. And that little figure there um, shows the number and range of population sizes, which is really important for us to consider. Obviously, fewer populations and smaller populations are much more at risk of decline and um, just extinction. But yeah, in those reports, we go over um, how the species is recognized by different entities that are tracking it. There's different state entities, as well as like Nature Serve. Our entity in Oregon, the Oregon Biodiversity Information Center, is an organization that we partner with a lot, and they house the occurrence information for our TNE plants. And so they're a really important source of information for us for understanding, um, yeah, the abundance and distribution of the plants. And they also assign a rank and status. Other things we include in these reports are info on the habitat and ecology, the range, um, different factors affecting the survival, and we look at this kind of through a lens um, that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service assesses the status of their listed species as well, and that's through the representation, resiliency, and redundancy of the species. And so in this report, we will propose a listing status based on all the information provided. And we actually have a small team of experts in botanical experts and plant conservation experts that we get their input on the proposed status as well. So it's not a decision that we're making alone. Um, I do wish I had more pretty pictures on this because all these are what we were able to list in 2023. And yeah, this a really interesting range of different plants from pretty much all across the state. Um, One thing I should have mentioned earlier that I didn't is that all federally listed plants are automatically added to our state TNE list. So they're near the bottom. White bark pine, that was recently federally listed, and that was why that one got added there. Um, but yeah, this was like I said, a big push to catch up on our TNE list that had gotten pretty outdated over the years. In 2024, we were able to review another suite of species. And again, these range from, yeah, the coast to the far northeast corner of the state. Mendocino paintbrush is out on the coast, as is large flower golden fields. And then rough goldenweed, that is, yeah, right up there near Washington and Idaho in the northeast corner of the state. And this is ongoing now that we, um, yeah, have some state resources to be able to dedicate towards this. We are going to continue to review the status of plants that haven't been listed yet, like the Wallowa rice grass and Douglas's clover. Those are things that partners across the state have demonstrated there's a need for concern for those. But we're also starting to review some of our plants that have been listed for a while to see whether conservation efforts are really making a difference for them or if they're maybe more in need of support than we've recognized in the past. This is something that is a little bit that I haven't actually participated in very much. Danielle Marshall has really spearheaded this effort, but I did want to bring it up. So I'm not the best person to speak on this topic, but I wanted to share it with you all just because it feels like something that maybe this Bee Steward community would be excited and interested in. And so this initiative is called the Oregon Native Seed Strategy, and it is a publication and it is accessible on our website. A group of collaborators called the Oregon Native Seed Collective put this together in a collaborative process, and um, we continue to help coordinate those efforts. Um, and kind of succinctly, the goal is to empower and enable folks. We want to build the capacity in the state so that we can follow this mantra, the right seed in the right place at the right time. Because right now, even if you want to do that, we might not have the plant materials available to be able to meet that goal. So these are some of the uh, yeah, some of the main goals for the Oregon Native Seed Strategy right now, making sure we have the native seed available that we need for the restoration and rehab projects that are needed across the state. Um, Figure out where the gaps are in native seed production and how we might be able to fill those, and how we can kind of get folks working together to maybe make some better decisions using native plants in their work. And something that we have participated in is like we've been doing some seed banking for our rarest native plants as a part of this so that we can kind of ensure that we have uh, that plant material, the seeds available for so they can be worked with in the future. And funding is kind of always a perpetual issue, but yeah, I think we're excited to see where this goes as support grows and more partners get more involved. Yeah, I expect this is not the last time you'll be hearing about the Oregon Native Seed Strategy. And that looks like it. Yeah, thanks again, everybody. Uh, And yeah, I've definitely got some time for questions now if anybody has any.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jordan. What a fascinating talk. I learned so much about policy that I didn't expect to, and we have a lot of questions about that in the chat. First of all, just kind of starting off with one that like I'm curious about, how did you get into rare plant conservation? Like what was your entry point into it?
Yeah, so I was it's one of those things I never would have been able to guess where I ended up. but I was really passionate about plants and botany. I was doing some seasonal work for a few years, and it was more focused on like ecological studies of succession, um, and others just kind of like restoration work, weed removal, things like that. But I realized that I was really passionate about native plants and was able to dabble in that a little bit in college. Um, and I actually started with the Oregon Department of Ag as the lowest member on the seasonal crew in 2010. Um, but my interest really helped me just stay, I think, and yeah, just invest a little bit more
That's amazing.
into the job, and yeah, was able to just carry it on from there. And I think I just, yeah, my interest only grew. So
That's amazing. So you literally started as like a seasonal technician and now you are here doing the rare native plant program. So bringing it back to some of those policy questions we had asked in the chat, we had some questions about the funding model for this program. I think you mentioned like kind of talked around it, but maybe didn't specifically say how the program is funded.
yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. Yep. Going through this presentation, I was like, oh gosh, there's so many things I left out that I would want to tell you. But yeah, this is a good one. So we are partially state funded. We have 4 staff members, and I actually didn't I sh I need to change this. Our manager, Troy Abercrombie, he oversees our program as well as the noxious weed control program. And he's done really great things for us in terms of advocacy and kind of like elevating our efforts and all. But the funding, so of our core 4 staff, there's funding for 2 positions and then a little bit more. And we cover those staff the rest of the way with external funding. So that's partnerships with often with federal agencies, um, to collaborate on either federally listed plants or other rare plants. Um, that is a really can be a really kind of exhausting process of continuously chasing external funding and grants. But on the flip side, it has empowered us or enabled us to do some really incredible work on like a wide variety of different plants across the state. Um, of that external funding, there is one very reliable source, or that has been very reliable, independent. Section 6 is a section of the Federal Endangered Species Act, and that directs the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to provide funding to state entities to support our conservation of the species in our state. And we like have a special agreement with them, a cooperative agreement that allows them to give us some funds to work on TNE plants. And there's other cooperators in the state that get Section 6 fund to work with animals. That'd be ODF and W, and invertebrates. The funding goes through the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. So long story short, we're partially soft funded, and we're looking to change that because as I kind of emphasized a few times, um, the need for investment on these state listed species, the need far exceeds our capacity. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of your good work on getting those projects completed with the staff and the time that you guys have. I know it's a huge job. Um, we also had a question in the chat about surveying processes that are conducted like before land development. Is that part of the work of the Rare Plant Program?
so we we don't have the capacity to do that in-house. Sometimes when it's like a really high priority plant, get involved if we feel like there's something that we really need to learn about it. But for for the development of public lands, that should be something that that is consulted with us on, you know. So if there's a non-federal public land manager that's going to develop some land, they should consult with us. And I'll be honest, like we haven't even been able to do enough outreach to inform all of those parties of what their responsibilities are. So sometimes things slip through the cracks. But it's the responsibility of the land manager to have the survey
Right.
done. And then they're supposed to submit that to us. So that's how it is supposed to work.
And
And
but
yeah,
oh, sorry, just to clarify. So that's only for those public agencies that you were talking about before. If it's someone's a private landowner, this isn't something that's enforceable or anything like that.
exactly. Not at all. Yep. There's no, there are no protections for T&E plants on private land, so no need for surveys or anything like that.
And then I think if you're willing, we have time for one last question,
Oh yeah,
which
of
is,
course.
can you tell us about any like delistings, or extinction events, like any like final actions that have occurred that you know about?
Yeah, so there have been some things delisted over the years, and they have not been since I've been here at the program that I can recall. But yeah, I can give you a couple interesting stories, try to keep it brief, but like um so um oh gosh. I think a lot of times um in terms of delistings, yeah, a common pattern is that like I said, there's very little known about these rare plants. Once something gets listed, a lot of resources gets dedicated um, to that species, and often that will include like broader surveys. People really keep their eyes out for it. And every now and again we get lucky, and what happens is folks realize, hey, there's more of this than we first thought. Um, that uh, isn't always the case, but every now and again that happens. So I think we had that a little flush of that happening in the late 90s and early aughts when things had been listed for about 10 years and people realized there was a few things that were more common than originally realized. Um, there was and on the other end of the spectrum, and sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. I do think there might be some plants on our list now that could potentially qualify for delisting. We just haven't gotten to those yet. Like it was more of a priority for us, like make sure we get protection for these things that really need it, and then let's focus on some of our other listed plants. But a really cool story that I want to share with you all is there was a species that was thought to be extinct in Oregon. It's called shiny fruited popcorn flower, Plagiobothris lamprocarpus, and it had only been collected once in about 1921
Hmm.
and it was just listed as like Grants Pass, which Grants Pass in 1921 is not the Grants Pass we have now. So we don't really know exactly like where that was collected. Um, but there had been surveys to try to relocate it that were unsuccessful. And just this past year, we had somebody find this species that yeah, it's kind of incredible. This was one that I had written off that I just was like, yeah, I'm never gonna see this one. I'm never gonna have the chance. No one's seen it. Um, and yep, they found it. There's a lot of like kind of just strange and happy coincidences that happened for that to happen. You know, it takes the right person to walk by a kind of innocuous little white flowered plant that had already kind of died back and go through the whole effort of really wondering what it is and taking out the hand lens and looking at the seed, the surface of the seed, and realizing, wait, this isn't what I expected, and then following all the way through to figure out what it was. And this ties into an iNaturalist record from 2018 that wasn't clearly identified. So it's really kind of like a cool modern story um, of rediscovery. And to me, someone who like, we face um, kind of a lot of challenges with, with conservation and just with kind of helping manage our environment and everything. But this rediscovery was a testament um, to native plants and plants in general and their ability to survive and persist and yeah, just succeed beyond like what I would have ever imagined. And that's not, I'm not counting on that happening for all of our plants, but it's really uplifting to have a story like that, that like not, when we might think all is lost, it's not necessarily the case. So, um, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So that little plant was out there the whole time, just waiting for somebody to take notice and discover it. How
Yep.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can't think of a more heartwarming note to end on. So thank you so much, Jordan, for joining us here today. It has been fabulous to get to learn more about this program, and I'm personally going to follow up on the seed program that you were talking about. It sounds really interesting. Um, and thank you so much for joining us this evening, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any rare plant stuff you want to check in about. So take care.